Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about pressure volume loop. So on the y-axis there's pressure and on the x-axis there's the volume. So first up, let's think about this. So what is a cardiac cycle that makes the volume go up? So it's the ventricular filling, right? So you got it right. So this is the ventricular filling. So this particular spot is the ventricular filling. So let's put a note on here so you don't forget when you go back to your notes. And then this one spot is the isovolumetric relaxation. The reason why it's called isovolumetric is because the volume here does not change. This is when at end diastole, at end systole, when the heart already ejected the blood and it's now resting and trying to relax. So this part is when the lowest volume of your heart is. So let's put end systolic volume. And this spot here is end diastolic volume. So think about this. What do you get when you do end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume? You get what is left, what is the total cardiac output, which is the stroke volume. So that's this part, stroke volume. So stroke volume, as we all know, is the amount of blood that is pumped out of your ventricle. So that's a stroke volume. So you can derive stroke volume from knowing your pressure volume loop. Okay, so another one is this one. Let's do another color. So this part is called the isovolumetric contraction, and this one is when your heart pump out of the blood. So the blood is from here and now it's emptying the blood to go to the lowest volume, right? So that's ventricular ejection. So let's write it down, ventricular ejection, and this one is isovolumetric contraction. And then now let's think about the valves. So wait, before we think about the valves, I forgot to point out that this blue section right here, the entire thing is systole. And then the yellow here, the whole entire thing, is diastole. So now let's think about the valves. So what is the valve that would need to open? So think about your heart. So this is the atrium, the ventricle. And what is the valve here that needs to open before you can fill the heart with the blood here? So that is called the mitral valve, right? The two miters, so two leaflets. So let's put here the mitral valve opens. And of course, when it's filled up, we can use a different color. The mitral valve closes. So what is the very thing that makes the mitral valve open? Just to make sure we have a good review of it. So the very thing that makes your mitral valve open is because, remember, there's higher pressure in your atria than in the ventricle. Atrial pressure is bigger than the ventricular pressure. So now it pushes the mitral valve open and now the blood goes in the ventricle. However, when the pressure inside your ventricle is now more than the atrial pressure, now the mitral valve closes to prevent backflow. So this is when the ventricular pressure is higher than the atrial pressure. And then over here, let's use a different color. Over here is when your atrial valve open. And then over here is when your, let's go find the color again, atrial valve close. So same thing. Your atrial valve opens. Why? Because now the ventricular pressure is higher than the aortic pressure. So now it opens your valve, aortic valve, and pushes the blood out to your system, makes circulation. And then the aortic valve over here, it closes, of course, again, to prevent regurgitation of blood from your aorta, to prevent from going back to the ventricle. So that's why the AV valve closes over here. And it's because, again, the aortic pressure is, aortic pressure is greater than the ventricular pressure. So that's pretty much it. And then the next one we should think of is the heart sounds. So when do we hear S1, S2, S3, S4? So S1 is the closure of, all the time, those heart sounds is because of a closure of a door. So like, think of your valves as doors. So which doors are closing and opening? So in systole, S1, which is that lub, it closes the what? Mitral valve and tricuspid valve. So it's here. So let's write down S1. Let's just write down in color green since S1. And then S2, when do we hear the S2 sound? Which is the semilunar valves closing, which is the aortic, and the pulmonic valves closing. So that is, again over here, S2 sound. So, okay, so we're done with that. But where do we hear S3 sound? So S3 sound can be heard when there is a filling, while we are filling the ventricle. So it's right around here. That's when we hear the S3 sound. And then S4 sound is around right here, right before S1. So there you have it, our pressure volume loop. I don't know if I should teach you guys about the blood pressure and how we can like derive stuff from the pressure volume loop. I only pointed out the the stroke volume here, but maybe I'll do it in another video. Okay, have fun studying. Like and subscribe and share to your friends so that you guys can help each other. Thank you.